how do you plan to get assault weapons away from people who don't want to give them up?
It's pretty simple. As with any law in this country, we would expect our fellow Americans to follow the law. It's one of those things that distinguishes us from so much of the rest of the world. We're a nation of laws, and no person is above the law, no matter how much they may disagree with a given law.
And making sure that we change our immigration laws to reflect our values.
We also have the precedent of Australia, which took the bold step of having a mandatory buyback of these AR-15s and AK-47s. As you know, weapons that were designed for war, to kill people on a battlefield that have no use for hunting or self-defense in your home, but can kill people at a terrifying rate and terrifying numbers throughohout this country.
But
so
Congressman, I mean,
this is the right thing to do, and I fully expect my fellow Americans to follow the law.
You expect mass shooters to follow the law?
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again. Because a vision softly creeping.
Our fellow Americans will follow the law, yes.
Congressman,
and
mass shooters don't fall by definition.
million...
The mass shooters in Parkland, in El Paso, I could go on for 10 minutes. They don't follow the law by definition.
There are so many instances where the proposals that we've made, whether it is a universal background check or a red flag law, or ending the sale of weapons of war, or buying those that are out there back, would have stopped many of the shootings that we see in a country that loses 40,000 people a year to gun violence.
In a country that loses 40,000 people a year to gun violence.
For years, we have heard that 30 to 40,000 people die each year due to gun-related violence. This stat has become the scarlet letter of the US, and for years, we all just accepted this data point as the gospel to the story of America's gun problem. The UK is the shining example of gun control for anti-gunners. The UK has a population size of 60 million people. So let's say 40,000 people were murdered with a gun. That would only be 0.06% of the population. Now let's look at America, where there are over 300 million guns and a population size of 327 million people. 40,000 people out of 327 million are only 0.01% of the population. And that's if all of those shootings were murders, which they are not. If you break down the numbers, according to the type of gun deaths, the number of gun murders in this country becomes dizzyingly small. Of that 40,000, roughly 29,250 are suicides. 1,612 are law enforcement shootings in the line of duty. 274 are negligent discharge deaths. And 8,863 are actual murders by way of criminal activity, drug-related, or mentally ill people. So as far as actual gun murders, it's not 40,000, it's 8,863 out of 327 million people. Yes, suicides matter, but suicides aren't a gun problem. If they were, America with its over 300 million guns would lead the world in suicides, but we're not even in the top 20. Not to mention universal background checks don't stop suicides, assault weapon bans don't stop suicides, because people don't use AR-15s to shoot themselves. So as far as I'm concerned, using suicide numbers to push more gun control is dishonest as hell. As for law enforcement shootings, that's mostly cops killing criminals who were trying to kill them or someone else. And that's not just with guns. Call me crazy, but I have very little remorse for a criminal who dies trying to kill someone else.
In a country that loses 40,000 people a year to gun violence. Would it stop every single shooting? No, but that should be no excuse for not taking action now while we have the opportunity to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And we also shouldn't be limited by the politics or the conventional political wisdom or the polling or the consultant class or the NRA on finally taking decisive action.
Understood. And I think that what Mayor Buttigieg was saying, yeah, it's obviously think high, aim, shoot for something aspirational, but it doesn't make sense that people are going to hand over their assault weapons. If they're mass shooters, if they want to do harm to people, they're not going to follow the law. So then what's your plan?
Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15, your AK-47.
And so, yes, if somebody has an assault weapon, a weapon of war, and poses a danger to people in their lives or people in their community or people in our lives,
hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15, your AK-47.
Then we're going to stop them. And
Meaning what? You're
I
going to
think
go
that's
to
a
their
matter
house.
for
Just
law
tell us
enforcement
how
and-
it works. You're going to go to if somebody doesn't voluntarily hand over their assault weapon, you're going to go to their house, and then what?
If we pass this law, then I expect our fellow Americans to follow the law. And this is not speculation. We've seen other countries do this,
Yeah,
like
I
Australia,
understand.
that have seen a significant decrease
follow the
in.
law. Law-abiding people follow the law, but our problem is with mass shooters who don't.
We know, because we've seen this in other countries, that when we take this step, we save the lives of those who would otherwise be taken from these mass shootings. We prevent guns from getting into the wrong hands, and we take them out of the hands of those who shouldn't own them in the first place. Not be popular in all circles, but it's necessary to save lives.
I understand that that's your aspiration, and I think that the question was, and then what? And then what's next? Because it sounds like confiscation.
You said, quote, Americans who own AR-15s and AK-47s will have to sell them to the government, all of them. You know, the critics call this confiscation.
It sounds like confiscation.
Call this confiscation.
Confiscation. And I just can't tell if you're comfortable with that. You know that that's a buzzword that makes a lot of people on the right and gun owners nervous. And so if that's what you're suggesting.
No, I'm not suggesting that. And I think that's why people use the word confiscation, because it scares people.
You know, the critics call this confiscation.
Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15, your AK-47.
I own an AR-15. A lot of our listeners own AR-15s. Why should they not have one?
To be clear, they should have them. If you purchase that AR-15, if you own it, keep it. What I'm talking about is a mandatory buyback, where Americans who own an AR-15 or an AK-47 will sell that weapon back to the government. We support the Second Amendment. If you own a gun, keep that gun. Nobody wants to take it away from you. At least I don't want to do that. But
Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15, your AK-47.
we support the Second Amendment. If you own a gun, keep that gun.
Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15, your AK-47.
Nobody wants to take it away from you. At least I don't want to do that. And there is precedent for doing this in other parts of the world successfully, without infringing upon our fellow Americans' Second Amendment rights to own a firearm that they need for self-defense in their home, or to go hunting, or for collection or sport. We can take those weapons that pose a mortal risk to our fellow Americans.